Hello Minster School community. This week I wanted us to sit and have a little think about those feelings we get when things just aren't fair. We know the word equality and we know that it has repercussions all around the world. But you know what? That feeling of it's not fair begins right here. We had some lovely chocolate cakes for our tea last night. And this morning I came downstairs and there are 3 left. But we're a family of 5. So being the good mum that I am, I have carefully and very calculatedly cut them into 6. So there's enough for each of us to have a little extra a bit later today. Now, although I've done my best to make this as fair as possible, of course there's going to be one left over. And who should that go to? And you know, it's always the way, even if I have worked it out with a ruler and measured each piece of cake, when I offer this plate to somebody, they're going to instantly find the largest piece and take that. There is a lot of it's not fair in life, isn't there? Of course, some of the most unfair things are nowhere near my table, but I'm reminded of them often when we sit around our table with all the good things that we have to eat. I'm reminded that the need for food banks has risen by almost 90% in the last year. I'm reminded of the 20% of school that's missed by girls around the world just because of access to sanitary hygiene. I'm reminded that some people who've been asked to shield feel forgotten. I'm reminded that not everybody gets access to doctors and healthcare and medicine when they need it. And that actually, even water is in hard supply in places. 41% of households globally have access to the internet. That means a lot don't. And we use it such a lot at the moment. And there's so much discrimination, religious, race, and sexuality. We're not tolerant of each other. And there's such an outcry for justice and equality in our world today. The pandemic has, if anything, exposed and deepened some of these inequalities that are around us in the world. I was interested this week and saddened to read about Peru. They have had one of the strictest and longest lockdowns, and yet the pandemic is affecting them in really huge numbers. Somebody who's looked into some of the reasons why this might be have commented that 70% of the population are employed in informal sector types of jobs, with little job security. Perhaps even sometimes working in areas where social distancing and employer care for them is not there at all. Interestingly, 40% of the population in Peru don't have access to a fridge, which makes a huge impact on the patterns that are needed for shopping and supplying fresh food. 38% of the population don't have a bank account, so access to government aid for those that are struggling is not easy to get. And 11.8% live in overcrowded homes, so the pandemic is hitting hard. I'm reminded of the many refugees living in camps around the world, who of course are relying on communal taps and toilets, and supplies of soap and cleanliness that are being provided by aid workers, whose work has of course been cut to reduce the risk of transmission. They are equally afraid of this virus, equally in need of social distancing and basic needs such as soap and hand washing. Christian Aid puts it this way: although the world is in this together, the pandemic will hit the poorest the hardest. And as a Christian, that deeply saddens me. For in God's eyes, I know that every single human being, no matter to what race we're born, to what religion we're born into, we are valuable and precious to God our Father, who made each of us. It matters to me that the inequalities I see around me have to change. I want to be part of how they change. But this is tricky, isn't it? It's hard to know what we can do. I was reminded this week, through a hashtag actually, that the small things we do can have very large ripple effects. But if we don't do anything, that water stays still. To change inequality, we all need to step up and be courageous, as we thought about last week. We all need to think of those small things that we can do to make life more equal for everybody. The UN has said that COVID-19 is a challenge for global health systems, but also a test of our human spirit, and that recovery must lead to a more equal world that is more resilient to future crises. It has exposed our vulnerabilities and some of the ugly side of our human systems in which so many people are oppressed and prejudiced against.
Roughly 7.6 billion people share life on planet Earth, and that number is growing all the time. That's a lot of people. To understand what it actually means, let's simplify things a bit. Close your eyes and imagine what it would look like if the entire world was a village of just 100 people. In our global village, 50 people would be women and 50 men. A quarter of the village, 25 people, would be children under the age of 14. 66 villagers would be adults between the ages of 15 and 64, and the remaining 9 people would be over the age of 65. Looking at the world map, just 5 of our 100 villagers would come from North America. 9 would hail from Latin America and the Caribbean, 10 from Europe, 16 from Africa, and a whopping 60 people would be from Asia. Australia's population, even if you include the neighboring islands, wouldn't even add up to 1 person in our global village. Our 100 villagers would hold many different religious beliefs. We would have 31 Christians, 23 Muslims, 15 Hindus, and 7 Buddhists. All the other religions would be represented by 8 people, and 16 people wouldn't identify with any particular religion. We would be a polyglot village too, speaking many languages. Considering only native speakers, 12 people would speak Mandarin, the largest group. 6 would speak Spanish, 5 English, 4 Hindi, 3 would speak Arabic, 3 Bengali, and 3 Portuguese. 2 would speak Russian, 2 Japanese, and a significant majority, 60 people, would speak nearly 7,000 other languages. 2/3 of our village, which is 66 people, wouldn't have access to safe, affordable surgery, and 33 people wouldn't be able to afford the medicine they need. 9 people wouldn't have access to clean, safe drinking water. 14 wouldn't have access to toilets of any kind. 22 would have no shelter from the wind and rain. 1 villager would be dying of starvation, and another 11 would be undernourished. 22 would be overweight. 86 people in our village would be able to read and write, which means 14 would be illiterate. Of those 14, 2/3 would be women. Only 66 would finish high school, and of them, only 7 villagers would go on to hold a college degree. While 18 people wouldn't have access to electricity, only 5 would not have access to a cell phone network. 47 people would be active internet users, which means 53 villagers would never be able to post photos, research anything online, or watch this video. Before we can change the world for the better, we need to understand what our world is like today. This is who we are. Imagine our village 50 years from now. What would you want it to look like then? Now open your eyes. There are 7.6 billion people waiting to see what you can do.
A prayer to finish. Of course, if you want this to be your prayer, just join in your heart with this Amen. Lord God, help us to build a sense of community in our area and in our world. Help us to recognise that we are all brothers and sisters made in your image, all precious. May our duty to participate see our communities thrive, enabling us to create a fairer world where everyone's voices can be heard. Amen.